Welcome back everybody, Johnny B here with devslopes.com, and in this lesson we are going to pick up right where we left off, and we are going to do the next step in creating a user, which is to log in the user. Okay, so we have our register user function right here, and now we are going to create our login function. So right below it, I'm just going to say func log in user. Okay, but before we get started, let's go ahead and check out our postman request here. So we finished up the register user. Now let's check out the login user. And you'll see that it's pretty similar. It has the same header type and actually has the same body type as well. The URL is different. So actually let's go ahead and create our login URL right now. So I'm going to copy this. It's account/login. And let's jump back into constants. And here we're going to need a new URL. So I'm going to say let URL login equal, and it is string interpolate the base URL and then add on account/login. And just to reiterate once again, these URLs are going to a specific location on the API, and so that the API knows what to do with the specific information and the request that it is receiving. All right, so let's jump back to auth service and back into Postman. And so it's pretty similar, you know, the same header, the same body, but what's different is what the API is doing with it. So let me see if I got the, let me make sure I got MongoD and our local host up and running. They are. So if I send this, we should actually be doing a login request on our local host. So I'm going to say send. And sure enough, here we go. We had a successful request. You can see here the status 200, which means that everything went okay. And we receive as a response from our API a JSON object with a key of user and a value of the user's email. But the important one here is the token. Okay, so remember in lesson 6 we were talking about web requests and APIs and how some things are locked down, and so you have to have an authorization token in the header, and this is the authorization token that we are going to need to be able to add to finish the creation of a user process, to do sending a message, to retrieve messages for the channels, etc. So this is very important. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump back into Xcode and code this out. So the Alamo file request is actually pretty similar to the register user function. We are going to need to pass in an email, which is of type string, a password, which is also of type string. And again, we are going to be using our completion handler so that we know when and if the web request was successful. So I'm going to say completion at escaping and completion handler. And then like we saw in Postman, the header and body are actually the same. So we can actually just copy this and we'll grab the lowercase email as well. But you see that we are now duplicating stuff, right? So let's go ahead and make a constant for this header. So I'm just going to copy this header here, or I'm going to cut it actually. And we're going to jump into constants. And down here, I'm going to make a new section for headers. And I'm going to say let, and I'm going to make this capitalized to fit our constant convention. And then I'm going to copy it and jump back into auth service. And let's see here, fix this up a little bit. I'm going to replace the header right here in the register user Alamo file request with header. And then right here we can delete this as well. Just clean this up a little bit. Body's okay. And then we're ready to create our Alamo file request. So just like we did with the register user, we're going to say Alamo fire.request. So now we are creating our web request. And the URL that we want it to go to is the one that we just created, which is URL_login. The method is still a post. The parameters is the body. Encoding is JSON encoding.default, And the headers is header, that constant that we just created. And in the register, we did a .response string, right? But I told you several times that normally we're going to be using with response JSON. So that's the one that we want this time, response JSON, because the response is specified in the API to be of type JSON. Okay, so I'm going to select that one, then press return again, and rename the data response to response, and just get rid of that code. Okay, so at this point we have received a response from the API. So first off, we want to do a check to make sure that we don't have any errors. So we're going to say if response.result.error is equal to nil, meaning there is no errors, everything looks good. So we're going to do some stuff here, but else we are just going to say completion is false. So that's our completion handler, and we're letting any of the functions, any of the locations that call this function know that the web request failed, basically. And then we're going to do a debug print to see what happens. We're going to say response.result.error as any, and that'll just print out the error. But if we were successful, we're going to say completion is true. So, you know, in the last function that we created, the register user, we didn't really need to do anything with the response, did we? You know, it was just to register a user. The API didn't actually send any useful data back to us. But this time, here in Postman, we see that we're getting some information back. We're getting a JSON object. And now we need to know how to handle receiving JSON from an API. Okay, so this is going to be called JSON parsing. All right. So strap in. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways. The first is kind of the more lower level, at the basics, at the base level of JSON parsing. And it's important to know how to do it this way. But then I'm going to show you how to do it with Swifty JSON, which I think is a much easier way of doing it. All right. So what we're going to do is inside of our response result is a JSON value, but we need to kind of turn that into something that we can use here in Xcode. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if let JSON is equal to response.result.value, and we're going to cast that as a dictionary. Okay, so we're going to cast it as a dictionary of type string. So remember, looking at our JSON objects in the past, we know that the key is always a string, but the value could be anything. It could be a bool, it could be a string, it could be an int, it could be another JSON object. So we're going to cast it as any. All right. So now we have a JSON variable. The syntax for working with a JSON dictionary is similar to that of, I mean, we've cast it as a dictionary. So really all we have to do to get to it is say if let email. So, you know, coming over here to Postman, we know that we have a JSON object with a key of user, and then the value is going to be a string of our email. Okay, so I'm going to say if let email is equal to JSON, and then we're going to drill into that JSON object, and we're going to look for the key called, what was it called? It was user. Okay, so user, and we're going to cast that as a string, and if we get that, if there is in fact an object inside of the JSON dictionary called user, then we're going to set the this variable right here, self.userEmail, equal to that value. So we're going to say self.userEmail is equal to email. All right, not too bad. So then we're going to also do the same thing with the token that we see here. So now we're looking for this guy right here, token. So we're going to say if let token is equal to JSON, the dictionary that we just created from the JSON data, and we're going to search for the token key. And if we find it, we're going to cast it as a string. And if we are successful, if we get it, then we're going to say self.auth token is equal to that token right there. All right, and that's it. Then once that's successful, we can say self.isLoggedIn is equal to true because now we have successfully logged in a user. So that's it. That is our login user function. In fact, we can use this right away. If we jump over to our create account VC, remember the flow is register user, login user, create user. So right here, instead of just printing registered user, we're going to call our next API call in line. So we're going to say auth service dot instance dot, and we're going to say login user, and we are going to pass in again the email, the password, which is just pass, and then the completion handler. Again, we're going to say success in, and we're going to get rid of this, and we're going to say if success. Let me just bump that back up. If success, let's go ahead and print, print logged in user, yay. Then I'm going to say comma, and we're going to then also print, just to make sure that it worked, we're going to say auth service.instance.auth token. All right, I'm going to save that, and let's run it. I'm going to put this back on a 6S and run it. All right, so we got our app open. I'm going to click login. Don't have an account, sign up here. And real quick, let's jump back into Safari. Let's go to MLabs. And this was the one that we created last time, test.register.com. And I want to use it again, so I'm actually just going to delete this object here, okay? And so that just removes that account object from our database. And you can do that with pretty much any of the collections and objects. In fact, let's just take a real quick look at what we got here, just to kind of go over. What we've been doing right now is registering users. So those are going to be here in accounts. There are also collections here for channels and messages and users that are generated because of the work that I've been doing while I was creating this app. But you can actually delete whole collections, and you can edit or delete objects inside of the collections, okay? So just a quick look at some of your options in MLab. But anyways, so back to Xcode and our simulator. So I'm gonna write here, I'm gonna say register at test.com. I'm gonna put in password 123456. And I'm going to say create account, and if all goes according to plan, here in just a second, we should see that it logs us in, and then it should print out the auth token as well. And I think it did just right here. Okay, so close this out, and sure enough, logged in user, and here is the auth token. So let's check in MLabs. And I'm going to refresh this. And once again, yep, there it is, register at test.com. All right, so now we have 2 out of 3 of our functions required to create a new user. We are registering a user, and now we are logging in that user so that we get the auth token so that we can then do the final step of adding the user. All right. So before we finish up here, I told you I was going to show you what I think is an easier way of working with JSON. So let's jump back into our create account, or not create account, let's go to auth service.swift. And I am just going to comment this out right here. Okay. And first off, we're going to import Swifty.json. So I'm going to say import Swifty.json. Okay. And let's go ahead and check out their GitHub page. If you just Google for Swifty.json, oh, it took me right to their GitHub. But if you just Google it and then click on it, should be the top result for GitHub. And you can come over here and take a look at it. Kind of talks about how why the typical way of JSON handling in Swift is not so good. Shows some examples, kind of like what we were just showing you. You have to, you have to cast it into a dictionary. Let's see where to go. Yeah, you have to cast it into a dictionary. Then you have to do a whole bunch of iflets to unwrap. You have to cast it. And so what Swifty.json does is it safely handles all of that for you. So for instance, you can do something simple just like this. Instead of having to do the if-lets, it handles all of that for you under the hood. And so we're going to rewrite this section right here using SwiftlyJSON. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do is we need to get the data out of the web response. So we're going to say guard let data equal response dot data else return. Okay, so we need the data because what SwiftlyJSON does is it creates a JSON object out of the response data. So then I'm going to say let JSON equal, and I'm going to say capital JSON and do an initializer. And what we want right here is to just pass in data, and the data that we're passing in is data. Okay, so now we have a JSON object, a SwiftlyJSON object. And so simply the next couple of steps is just setting self.userEmail equal to JSON, and we're going to drill down into it and get the user. And what I really like about SwiftlyJSON is that you can say .string value, okay? And this automatically safely unwraps this value for you. So you could do the if-lets and just do .string, but what this does for you is it'll say, it automatically unwraps it for you, or it'll just set it to a empty string. All right, so that's super helpful because there are times when you need to know if something is nil and to do something about it, but most of the time, if it doesn't exist, then you probably just want it to be an empty string or 0 if it's for numbers. And so I think that this is super helpful. So what we're just going to do then is say self.auth token is equal to JSON, and that is token dot string value, and that's it. So these 4 lines versus these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I guess that's technically 8 lines. You don't have to do the if-lets. You don't have to cast into dictionaries. You don't have to cast as strings. I think it's a super sleek way of handling working with JSON. And this right here is about as easy as it comes working with JSON the old way. If you have nested JSON objects or arrays, it gets a lot hairier, and the benefits of working with SwiftlyJSON become even more apparent. All right, so it's important to know how to do it this way, just because you might not be in an environment where they want to use SwiftlyJSON. They may really want you to do it the old-fashioned way, which is fine. So just wanted to show you both ways so that you have options. But I am going to continue using SwiftlyJSON for the rest of this course. So I'm going to delete that other stuff. And just to make sure that we are still working correctly, I'm going to run this again and test this one more time. Okay, so I'm going to log in. Don't have an account, sign up here. Let's create a new one. So register to at test.com and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and create an account. And there we go, logged in user, and there's our auth token. All right, so our JSON refactor worked perfectly, and we are good to go onto our third and final stage of creating a user. So yeah, in this lesson, we learned about working with JSON. We talked about it using it the old way, as well as a different way with SwiftlyJSON. So I hope you guys liked both ways. Make sure to know the first way that I showed you, because it's very important that you understand what's going on under the hood. But yeah, so this has been some good stuff. Hope you guys are enjoying it so far. I'm going to go ahead and commit our stuff that we've been working on so far. So I'm going to say git status git add dot git commit -m. This is lesson 11. All right, so hope you guys are excited to finish up the account creation process in the next lesson, and I will see you there.